She wore a plain blue dress with a white apron, practical for her work but unable to hide her natural beauty. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old. "Whatever's hot," Zane replied, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd spoken to anyone, let alone a woman. "Stew then," she said with a nod. "Made it myself this morning." Something in her expression, a mixture of pride and reservation, made Zane pause. "Is it good?" The unexpected question drew a genuine smile from her. "Best in 3 counties, or so they tell me." "Then I'll have that." As she turned to leave, Zane noticed the way the other diners regarded her, with respect but also a certain distance. She moved through the room with purpose, serving efficiently but rarely engaging beyond what was necessary. Like him, she seemed to prefer the margins. When she returned with his meal, steam rising from the bowl, he caught sight of a small scar near her temple, partially hidden by a strand of hair. Her hands, though delicate, showed the calluses of someone well acquainted with work. "Name's Zane," he said, surprising himself. She hesitated before answering. Emma Mitchell." The stew was indeed exceptional, rich with vegetables and tender beef. Zane couldn't remember the last time he'd tasted something prepared with such care. "You weren't lying about the stew," he said when she came to check on him. "I don't lie," she replied simply. "Not worth the trouble." Something in her tone suggested experience with trouble. Zane found himself wondering what had brought her to this frontier outpost, working as a cook in a modest inn. He stayed longer than intended, nursing a cup of coffee until the dining room emptied. Emma moved between tables, clearing dishes with efficient movements. When she approached his table again, he noticed dark circles beneath her eyes. "Long day?" he asked. "They all are," she answered with a shrug. "But honest work is better than the alternative." Before he could respond, shouting erupted from the kitchen. A large, red-faced man burst through the swinging door. "Girl, where's that order for the Miller party? Been waiting 15 minutes." Emma's shoulders tensed, but her face remained calm. "Coming right now, Mr. Pearson." The man noticed Zane watching and adjusted his tone slightly. "Well, hurry it up. Can't keep paying customers waiting." As Emma disappeared into the kitchen, Zane felt an unfamiliar sensation, concern for someone other than himself. He pushed it away, left payment for his meal with extra for her service, and stepped back into the night air. He'd be gone by morning, and this town would be nothing but another memory on the long trail, but fate had other plans. Dawn broke with gunshots and shouting. Zane jerked awake in the livery stable where he'd bedded down, hand automatically reaching for his revolver. Racing outside, he found the town in chaos. A band of outlaws, 5 men on horseback, were shooting into the air and ransacking the general store. As Zane assessed the situation, a scream cut through the commotion. At the inn, Emma struggled against a 6th outlaw who dragged her toward the horses. Without thinking, Zane drew his weapon and fired a warning shot. "Let her go," he called, advancing steadily. The outlaw turned, revealing a face marred by a jagged scar. "Mind your business, cowboy, unless you're eager to die." "I said let her go." Zane's voice remained level, but something had changed. The usual caution that governed his every decision had been replaced by a certainty he didn't understand. What followed happened in a blur: the outlaw's draw, Zane's faster response, the man falling backward with a look of surprise. The other raiders, seeing their companion down, converged on Zane's position. Emma broke free in the confusion, racing toward the sheriff's office. Outnumbered, Zane took cover behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around him. He returned fire judiciously, knowing each shot had to count. Minutes stretched like hours until finally, rifle fire from the direction of the sheriff's office joined the fray. The outlaws, now caught in a crossfire, retreated, dragging their wounded companion with them. When the dust settled, Zane found Emma standing nearby, a rifle still in her hands. She'd been the first to reach the sheriff's office and had grabbed the weapon herself. "You know how to use that," he said, not a question. "My father taught me," she replied. "Before he died." Their eyes met in understanding, two souls familiar with loss. Sheriff Blackburn approached, holstering his pistol. That was Jack Randall's gang, been terrorizing towns up and down the territory. he turned to Zane. "You've made enemies today, son. They'll be back." "I'll be gone by then," Zane answered automatically. The sheriff exchanged a look with Emma. "Might not be wise. Randall doesn't forget a face, and he's got connections across 3 territories." "He needs time to heal anyway," Emma interjected, nodding toward Zane's arm where blood stained his shirt, a graze he hadn't even noticed. "The inn has a room," she continued. "On the house, least we can do." Against his better judgment, Zane found himself nodding, just until the wound healed, just until Randall's gang moved on, just a few days. But days became a week, and Zane discovered a rhythm to life in Sweetwater that appealed to something long dormant within him. Each morning he would help with chores around the inn, fixing the loose porch rail, reinforcing the back door, tasks the aging proprietor Mr. Pearson couldn't manage, and each evening he would take his meal in the dining room where Emma would sometimes join him after her work was done. He learned she was 20 years old, orphaned at 15 when influenza took both parents. She'd made her way working in kitchens, discovering a talent for cooking that earned her steady employment. But beneath her practical exterior, he glimpsed a woman who yearned for something more. "Why cooking?" he asked one evening as they sat on the inn's back porch, the day's heat finally yielding to a cool breeze. Emma's fingers traced the worn wooden railing. "It was something my mother taught me. When I cook, it's like she's still here, guiding my hands," she smiled faintly. "And people need to eat, so there's always work." "You're good at it," Zane offered. "That stew was the best meal I've had in years." "It's just food," she demurred, but pleasure colored her cheeks. "No, it's more, he struggled for words. "It's care, attention. Things are scarce out here." Emma studied him in the fading light. "And what about you? Always been a drifter?" "Since I was old enough to ride," he admitted. "Safer that way." "Safer from what?" The question pierced through his usual defenses. "From this," he gestured vaguely between them, "getting attached. When you care about people out here, you just set yourself up to lose them. That's a lonely way to live." "It's a way to survive," he countered. Emma was quiet for a moment. "Maybe surviving isn't enough." The words followed Zane to his room that night, echoing as he stared at the ceiling. Surviving had been his only goal for so long, he'd forgotten to question whether it was sufficient. The next morning, a telegram arrived for the sheriff. Randall's gang had robbed a bank in Laramie, 30 miles east, 3 people dead. Sheriff Blackburn showed Zane the message with a grim expression. "They'll be flush with cash now. Might head to bigger territory or might circle back here for revenge. Can't say." Zane's instincts told him to move on, to disappear before trouble found him again. Yet something held him in Sweetwater, something with honey-blonde hair and green eyes that saw too much. That evening, Mr. Pearson approached Zane's table, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "Got a proposition for you, Whitfield. My stable hand quit yesterday, headed to California for the gold fields, fool that he is. Needs someone who knows horses. Job's yours if you want it." Zane opened his mouth to decline, then caught sight of Emma watching from the kitchen doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll think about it," he said instead. Later he found Emma in the garden behind the inn, gathering herbs in the last light of day. "Pearson offered me a job," he said without preamble. She didn't look up. "I heard. I don't usually stay in one place." "I know," she straightened, finally meeting his eyes. "But maybe you should consider it, just until winter. The passes get bad and travel's difficult anyway." It was a reasonable suggestion, and yet they both knew it wasn't about the weather. "I'm not good at putting down roots," Zane admitted. "Neither was I," Emma replied softly, "until I had to be." The air between them changed, charged with unspoken possibilities. Zane took a step closer, drawn by forces he'd spent years resisting. A shout from the inn broke the moment. Mr. Pearson calling for Emma. She gave Zane a regretful smile and hurried inside, leaving him with the scent of rosemary and sage and questions he couldn't answer. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, thunder shaking the inn's foundations. Unable to sleep, Zane made his way downstairs for coffee, surprised to find the kitchen already occupied. Emma stood at the stove, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a simple robe over her nightdress. She turned at his entrance. "Couldn't sleep either." "The storm," he explained, though it wasn't entirely true. She nodded toward the pot. "Coffee's almost ready." They sat at the kitchen table, listening to the rain lash against the windows. In the intimate space with no one else awake, the walls they'd built seemed thinner. "Why did you help me?" Emma asked suddenly. "With Randall's man." "You could have ridden out, avoided the trouble." Zane considered the question, searching for honesty. "I don't know, I just couldn't let him take you. Even though getting involved went against everything you believe about survival." He met her eyes across the table. "Maybe some things are worth the risk." Emma's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I should tell you something about Randall." Zane went still, sensing the weight of her words. "2 years ago, I worked at a saloon in Cheyenne." "Not as a girl," she added quickly. "In the kitchen. Randall frequented the place. He took an interest in me." Her voice hardened. "When I refused his advances, he became violent. I defended myself with a kitchen knife." "That's how he got that scar." Understanding dawned. "He recognized you here." She nodded. "I've been running from him ever since. Every few months I move on before he can find me. I thought Sweetwater was far enough, small enough to disappear in. And now I've made things worse," Zane said grimly. "No," Emma reached across the table, hesitantly touching his hand. "You're the first person who's ever stood up for me. I just wanted you to know what you've gotten yourself into." The touch of her fingers against his sent warmth through Zane's body, challenging years of self-imposed isolation. "I'll take that job," he said. "Stay through winter at least." Relief and something deeper flickered in Emma's eyes. "Mr. Pearson will be pleased." "And you?" A smile touched her lips. "I won't complain about having someone around who can reach the high shelves." As summer yielded to fall, Zane fell into the rhythms of Sweetwater. Working with the horses suited him, and he found satisfaction in rebuilding the inn's aging stable. The town gradually accepted his presence, no longer viewing him as a passing stranger. Most evenings found him and Emma sitting on the back porch after her kitchen duties were done, sharing stories of their pasts. He told her about his childhood on a small ranch, his father's dreams of expanding their land, the raid that had shattered everything. She spoke of her mother's recipes, passed down through generations, and her hopes of someday having her own establishment. "Not just cooking for travelers," she explained. "A place where people come specifically for the food, where they leave feeling better than when they arrived." "You already do that," Zane observed. "Your cooking makes this place special." Emma smiled, pleased by his understanding. "It's different when it's yours, though, when you're building something that belongs to you." The concept resonated with Zane in ways he hadn't expected. For years, ownership had seemed like a burden, possessions that could be lost, attachments that created vulnerability. But watching Emma's face light up as she described her dream, he glimpsed a different truth. One evening in late September, Mr. Pearson pulled Zane aside. "Town's holding its harvest dance Saturday next. Good for business if my employees attend." His knowing look made it clear he'd noticed the growing connection between Zane and Emma. Zane had never been one for social gatherings, but the thought of Emma in something other than her work dress, perhaps with her hair styled differently, proved compelling. He found her in the kitchen, kneading dough for the next morning's bread. "Pearson mentioned the harvest dance," he began awkwardly. Emma's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "Yes, the town holds one every year. Would you, that is, I thought maybe we could attend." Together, the words came out more stiffly than he'd intended. Emma looked up, flour dusting her cheek. "Are you asking me to accompany you to the dance, Mr. Whitfield?" The formality made him smile. "I believe I am, Miss Mitchell." "Then I accept." Her eyes danced with quiet happiness. "Though I should warn you, my dancing skills are limited." "That makes 2 of us." The night of the dance transformed the town. Lanterns hung from every available surface, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by families from outlying farms. A small band of local musicians tuned their instruments in the corner of the meeting house. Zane waited at the foot of the inn staircase, uncharacteristically nervous in his best shirt and newly polished boots. When Emma appeared, he momentarily forgot to breathe. She wore a dress of deep green that matched her eyes, her honey-blonde hair arranged in an elegant knot with soft tendrils framing her face. A small silver pendant, her mother's she'd once mentioned, glinted at her throat. "You look beautiful," he said simply. A blush colored her cheeks. "You clean up nicely yourself, Cowboy." The meeting house buzzed with activity as they entered. Neighbors called greetings, children darted between adults, and the scent of apple cider filled the air. For a moment, Zane felt a surge of his old anxiety. Too many people, too much noise, too much potential for something to go wrong. Then Emma's hand slipped into his, anchoring him to the present. "Just for a little while," she murmured, understanding his discomfort. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples moved to the center of the room. Zane and Emma watched from the sidelines until a slower melody began. "Shall we try?" Emma suggested. Zane led her onto the floor, placing one hand respectfully at her waist, the other holding hers. They moved somewhat awkwardly at first, finding their rhythm as the music continued. "This isn't so difficult," he observed. Emma laughed softly. "Speak for yourself, I'm counting in my head." As they danced, the rest of the gathering seemed to fade away. Zane found himself studying the details of her face, the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the curve of her lips, the way her eyes reflected the lantern light. "What are you thinking?" she asked, noticing his intent gaze. "That I've never met anyone like you," he answered honestly. "Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and still find the courage to build something new." Her expression softened. "We're not so different, you and I, except you're still afraid to build." "Not afraid," he corrected, cautious. "Is there a difference?" Before he could answer, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Sheriff Blackburn entered, face grim, making straight for the mayor. The music faltered as the two men conferred in low, urgent tones. Then the mayor cleared his throat, calling for attention. "Folks, I'm sorry to interrupt the festivities, but Sheriff Blackburn has received word that Jack Randall's gang was spotted 20 miles south of here this morning. They've been hitting small towns across the territory, and there's reason to believe they might be headed our way." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Parents gathered children closer, men exchanged worried glances. "There's no cause for panic," the sheriff added, "but I am asking for volunteers to help fortify the town and establish a watch rotation starting tonight." Emma's hand tightened in Zane's, her face paling. He felt her trembling and led her outside to the relative quiet of the street. "He's coming for me," she whispered. "I know it." "We don't know that," Zane countered, though he suspected she was right. "I should leave." "Tonight," her voice steadied with resolve. "If I'm gone, maybe he'll pass the town by." Zane's instincts screamed in agreement. Running was safer, disconnecting was safer. It had always been his way. But as he looked at Emma's face in the moonlight, another truth asserted itself. Sometimes the greatest risk wasn't in staying, it was in walking away from something irreplaceable. "No," he said firmly. "Running isn't the answer this time." "Zane, listen to me," he took her shoulders gently. "All my life I've been running. From memories, from attachments, from the possibility of loss. And what has it gotten me? Emptiness, loneliness." He took a deep breath. "I don't want to run anymore, not from Randall and not from what I feel for you." Emma's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we stand our ground, together. This town, these people, they're worth fighting for." He paused, gathering courage. "You're worth fighting for." Tears gathered in her eyes, but her chin lifted with determination. "You could die. We could all die tomorrow from fever or a fall from a horse or 100 other ways," he countered. "But I'd rather live fully today than survive emptily for years." Emma studied his face, searching for certainty. What she saw must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "Together, then." The next days passed in tense preparation. Men reinforced doors and shutters, women stockpiled food and medical supplies. Sheriff Blackburn organized the volunteers into watches, positioning them strategically throughout the town. Zane threw himself into the efforts, helping to construct barricades at key entry points and working with the other men to establish defensive positions. Emma, meanwhile, coordinated with the town's women to ensure everyone would have food and water if they needed to shelter in place. 3 nights after the dance, Zane took his turn at watch from the roof of the general store, which provided a clear view of the southern approach to town. The night was quiet, moonlight silvering the prairie beyond the town limits. Movement caught his attention, a rider approaching fast from the east, not the south. Zane signaled to the watchman at the church, who rang the bell in a pattern they'd established for news rather than attack. The rider was a ranch hand from the Walsh spread 15 miles east. He dismounted heavily, face streaked with soot and blood. "Randall," he gasped as men gathered around him, "hit our place at sundown. Burned the barn, took horses, killed Mr. Walsh when he tried to stop them." Sheriff Blackburn steadied the young man. "How many in the gang?" 8, maybe 10. They were headed west, talking about Sweetwater. He looked around wildly. "Said something about settling scores and taking what belongs to them." Zane's blood ran cold. He sought out Emma in the crowd that had gathered, finding her standing rigidly beside Mrs. Cooper, the seamstress. "They'll be here by morning," the sheriff announced. "Ladies, children, and those unable to fight should gather at the church. The rest of us will take positions according to the plan." As the crowd dispersed to prepare, Zane made his way to Emma. "You should go to the church," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I won't hide while others fight my battle." "Emma." No, her voice was steel. "I've been running from him for 2 years. It ends now, one way or another." Zane recognized the futility of arguing. "Then stay close to me." Dawn broke with tense anticipation. The town appeared deserted, with defenders hidden inside buildings and behind barricades. Zane and Emma positioned themselves in the sheriff's office, which provided a clear view of the main street while offering solid stone walls for protection. The sound of hoofbeats announced Randall's arrival. 8 riders entered the town slowly, weapons drawn, led by a man with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. They paused in the center of the street, looking around at the seemingly empty town. Come out," Randall called, his voice carrying in the morning stillness. "We know you're hiding. Make this easy, and maybe we'll only burn half the town." Silence answered him. "I'm here for the Mitchell woman," he continued. "Give her up, and the rest of you might live to see sundown." Sheriff Blackburn stepped out from the barricade near the bank, rifle lowered but ready. "Turn around, Randall. You're not welcome here." The outlaw laughed. "One old man with a badge. Is that all Sweetwater can muster?" On cue, armed townsmen appeared at windows and rooftops, weapons trained on the gang. Randall's smile faltered slightly as he assessed the odds. "Last chance," the sheriff warned. "Ride out now." For a moment it seemed Randall might reconsider. Then his expression hardened. "Kill them all," he ordered, raising his pistol toward the sheriff. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Zane pushed Emma down behind the heavy oak desk as bullets shattered the office window. The initial volley lasted seconds but felt like hours. When it quieted, Zane risked a glance outside. 2 of Randall's men were down, along with one townsman who'd exposed himself too fully. The remaining outlaws had taken cover behind water troughs and the hitching post in front of the saloon. "We need to move," Zane told Emma. "They'll focus on this building once they realize the sheriff's still alive." As if to confirm his words, concentrated fire began hitting the office from multiple directions. "Back door," Emma said, pointing toward the rear of the building. "It leads to the alley." They crawled toward it, keeping below window level as bullets continued to punch through the walls. In the alley, they pressed against the building, assessing their options. "The stables," Zane decided. "We can circle around behind the outlaw's position." They moved quickly between buildings, the sounds of gunfire providing cover for their footsteps. At the livery stable, they slipped inside to find Mr. Pearson already there, shotgun in hand. "Thought you might come this way," the innkeeper said. "They've got the street blocked, but we can get to the rooftops through the hayloft." Zane nodded appreciatively. Good thinking. A plan formed quickly. From the rooftops, they could outflank Randall's position. Zane would move to the right, Pearson to the left, creating crossfire that would force the outlaws into the open where the sheriff's men could pick them off. As Pearson climbed the ladder to the loft, Zane turned to Emma. "Stay here. Keep the door barred." She gripped his arm. "Be careful." Their eyes held for a heartbeat. Then, with a suddenness that surprised them both, Emma rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but electric, a promise and a plea wrapped into one. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I will," he vowed. Zane followed Pearson up the ladder, his heart pounding from more than exertion. They crawled across the roof, separating at the peak to move in opposite directions. From his vantage point, Zane could see Randall directing his remaining men. The outlaw leader hadn't joined the shooting, instead staying back where he could survey the town. Smart, Zane grudgingly admitted. Dangerous. He positioned himself behind a chimney and took careful aim with his rifle. The first shot struck one of the outlaws in the shoulder, spinning him into the open where the sheriff's men finished the job. Pearson's shot followed moments later, taking down another. Confusion spread through Randall's ranks as they realized they were being fired upon from behind. Two made a break for their horses, only to be cut down by fire from the defenders ahead. One surrendered, throwing down his weapon and raising his hands. Randall, seeing his advantage evaporating, backed toward the only escape route, the alley behind the livery stable. With sudden clarity, Zane realized his mistake. "Emma," he breathed, abandoning his position and racing across the rooftop. Below, Randall had reached the stable door. Finding it barred, he stepped back to kick it in. Zane didn't hesitate. He leapt from the roof, crashing into Randall and sending them both sprawling in the dirt. His rifle went flying, leaving him unarmed as he rolled to his feet. Randall recovered quickly, drawing his pistol. "You're that cowboy from before," he snarled. "Should have killed you when I had the chance." "Still can," Zane replied, circling warily, "if you're fast enough." The outlaw's eyes narrowed. "Fast enough to kill you and the girl both." Before he could fire, the stable door burst open. Emma stood framed in the doorway, Pearson's shotgun in her hands. Her face was pale but determined as she leveled the weapon at Randall. "Drop it," she ordered. Randall laughed. "You couldn't use that knife right 2 years ago. Think you can handle a shotgun now?" "I'm not the same frightened girl," Emma replied steadily. "I've found something worth fighting for." Something in her tone must have convinced Randall of her resolve. His gaze flicked between her and Zane, calculating odds that were rapidly deteriorating. In one fluid motion, he swung the pistol toward Emma. Zane lunged forward as the gun discharged, knocking Randall's arm upward. The bullet went wild, splintering the doorframe. The shotgun roared in response. Randall staggered backward, clutching his chest, disbelief etched across his features. He dropped to his knees, then pitched forward onto the dirt. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of their breathing. Then Sheriff Blackburn and his deputies rounded the corner, weapons raised. "It's over," Emma said quietly, lowering the shotgun. "It's finally over." The aftermath unfolded in a daze. The town's doctor tended to the wounded. The undertaker prepared the dead for burial. Sheriff Blackburn took statements, confirming that Emma and Zane had acted in self-defense. The two surviving outlaws were locked in cells to await transfer to the territorial prison. As night fell, Zane found Emma sitting on the back porch of the inn, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I never thought I could do that," she said without looking up. "Take a life." Zane sat beside her. "You did what you had to do. He would have killed us both." "I know," she raised her eyes to his. "And I'd do it again to protect you. That's what scares me, how easily I made that choice." "It means you found something worth protecting," he said softly. "Something worth the risk." Emma's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing shock. "Have I?" Zane took her hands in his. I've spent my whole life believing that caring for someone was a weakness, that it would only lead to pain when I inevitably lost them." He paused, gathering courage. "But these past months with you have shown me something different. Caring, loving, it gives us strength. It gives us a reason to fight, to build, to believe in tomorrow." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I love you, Emma Mitchell. I love your strength, your courage, your dreams. I love the way you put your whole heart into every meal you cook, every person you care for." He smiled gently. "I love that you've shown me a different way to live." "I love you too," she whispered. "More than I thought possible." 3 days later, as the town began returning to normal, Mr. Pearson called them both into his office. The aging innkeeper seemed unusually solemn as he gestured for them to sit. "Been thinking a lot since the attack," he began, smoothing his mustache. "Not getting any younger and running this place takes more energy than I've got left." Emma and Zane exchanged concerned glances. "So I've made a decision," Pearson continued. "I'm selling the inn." "Mr. Pearson, no," Emma protested. "This place is your life." The old man chuckled. "Was my life. Now I'm thinking I'd like to move to Denver, be closer to my daughter and her children." He leaned forward. "I'd like to sell it to you too." Stunned silence met his words. "Us," Zane finally managed. "Makes perfect sense," Pearson insisted. "Emma's the heart of this place already. Her cooking's what brings most folks in. And you, Zane, you've rebuilt half the place in the months you've been here. You know it inside and out." "But we don't have that kind of money," Emma said practically. Pearson waved a hand. "Got that figured too. You can pay over time from the profits. I'll hold the note." His eyes twinkled. "Course, it would be simpler if you were married, one owner instead of two." Zane felt heat rise in his face. "Mr. Pearson, we haven't, that is, Emma and I haven't discussed." "Well, discuss it then," the innkeeper interrupted, standing. "I'll give you some privacy." As the door closed behind him, Emma turned to Zane with wide eyes. "Did he just propose for you?" Despite the tension, Zane couldn't help laughing. "I believe he did," he sobered, taking her hands. "It's not how I would have done it. I'd have waited, courted you properly." "We've faced death together," Emma pointed out. "I'd say we're beyond conventional courtship." Zane studied her face, searching for signs of hesitation. "Is it what you want? The inn, I mean." A smile bloomed on her face. "It's everything I told you I wanted. A place of my own where people come for the food, where they leave feeling better than when they arrived." She squeezed his hands. "And you, is it what you want?" He considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, the idea of owning property, settling in one place, would have seemed like a prison sentence. Now, looking at Emma, he saw only possibility. "What I want," he said carefully, "is a life with you. Whether that's here or elsewhere." Emma's eyes glistened. "Ask me." Zane slid from his chair to one knee, still holding her hands. "Emma Mitchell, will you marry me? Build a life with me? Make this place ours together?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "To all of it, yes." Winter arrived with a gentle snowfall on their wedding day. The entire town gathered in the small church, flowers imported from Denver at great expense brightening the wooden pews. Zane stood at the altar, hardly believing the turn his life had taken in the space of 6 months. When Emma appeared at the church doors, a vision in ivory lace, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. She walked toward him with steady steps, her smile radiant, carrying a bouquet of dried prairie flowers and evergreen sprigs. The ceremony passed in a blur of promises and hopes. Later, at the reception held in the dining room of what would soon be their inn, Zane pulled his bride onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Beyond words," she replied, leaning into his embrace. As they swayed to the music, Emma glanced around at the room filled with well-wishers. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, people who care. A future that's not shaped by fear." "Neither did I," Zane admitted. "I was too busy surviving to think about living." She looked up at him, her green eyes bright with love. "And now I understand the difference." As the evening wound down, they found themselves alone in the kitchen. Emma had insisted on preparing a special dessert for their guests, despite protestations that a bride shouldn't work on her wedding day. "I'm just a cook, not a bride," she had whispered teasingly to Zane earlier, as she tied an apron over her wedding gown. Now, as they stood together in the quiet kitchen, Zane wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pressing a kiss to her neck. "You're both to me," he murmured. "My wife, my partner, my heart." Emma turned in his embrace, flour dusting her cheeks just as it had the first day they met. "And you're my cowboy," she replied softly. "The man who taught me that running isn't the only way to survive. Sometimes standing your ground is how you truly live." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in pristine white. Inside, warmth radiated from the kitchen hearth, and from the love of two people who had finally found home in each other. Spring would bring new challenges, renovations to the inn, now officially theirs, expansion plans for the dining room, perhaps even thoughts of children to fill the upstairs rooms with laughter. But for tonight, they stood together in the place where their story had begun, no longer just surviving, but truly alive at last.